you are broke, you have no money, right? And this
Yep.
is a scale where you have so much money and you're living a life of abundance, okay?
Yep.
Now, in this scale, when you start out, especially as a young entrepreneur, you're so close to the scale here, right? Like this,
Yep.
right? Like, if this is a scale, you're like right here. You're so close to going all broke. Not even in a bad way, right? And so right now is the time for you to take all risk because you're not far off being fully broke, right? You have nothing to lose.
Welcome to the Deals Estate Wholesaling podcast, where we discuss finding, financing, and facilitating off-market real estate deals. I'm your host, Junaid and I, and I'm joined today on the show by none other than Junaid Javaid to discuss and share his experience on everything about wholesaling, buying large multifamilies, land development, anything you can think about doing big deals. Junaid is here to discuss about it today. So a little bit about who he is. Junaid is a young and ambitious investor who has a wealth of knowledge in real estate. He has wholesaled multiple six-figure deals, bought large multifamily properties, and he's currently developing a high-rise condominium. In today's episode, Junaid and I discuss how we transition from doing smaller residential deals to bigger apartments and land development deals. We also discussed the off-market strategies that he used to lock up a 44 units development under contract. And finally, we discussed the differences between working on residential properties and working on larger buildings and land development. So guys, you want to stay till the very end. Now, before we dive in, I want to say a big thank you to everyone who is tuning in. If you are a fan of this podcast, hit the like and the subscribe button, and also leave us a 5-star rating. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Hi, Junaid. Welcome to the Deals Estate Wholesaling podcast.
Hey, Deji, thanks for having me here.
Thanks for coming on, man. I'm so excited for multiple reasons. One, this is going to be an explosive episode. It's been a while anyone heard from you, so I'm honored that you came here today, and it's going to be a fire episode.
Listen, Deji, I made you a commitment like a year ago, and I told you just give me some time and I'll come on the podcast. And you're absolutely right. Like my last podcast was probably 3 years ago when I was still wholesaling. So I'm very excited to share the updates and how far I've came through my journey since then.
Nice, man. A lot of things that are happening, and I know this has been worth the wait. So, for everyone who is like trying to fall off their seats right now, I guess the question is, we haven't heard from him in the past 2-3 years. Maybe some new listeners are like, who is this guy that we haven't heard from in the past 2-3 years? So maybe you could start off and let us know, can you tell us about yourself? Who is Junaid and how your real estate journey has evolved to date?
Absolutely. So my name is Junaid, known as JJ, and known as through my social media, Invest with JJ. I'll take you guys all the way back. So I come from a construction engineering background. I studied that in my college, and I came from my entrepreneurial family. My dad had a business back in Pakistan and also had a business here in Canada. And so he was self-employed. And even at the young age, I was always into entrepreneurship. I always wanted to start my own business. I was always very, very ambitious. And so I remember back in my college days, I would buy things from my dad's store, like watches, cell phones, shoes, and then I would brand it and I would sell it on the marketplace for a lot more. And
Oh,
that's how I
wow.
survived throughout my whole college, buying time back by making money like this. And so, after I graduated, I worked as a site super for a construction company. I went in there for an interview for a labor job. I ended up convincing them to hire me as their site super because I have knowledge in the field of construction. And so I went there, got the job. I worked there for 7 months and immediately knew that this was something not for me. One thing I always realized, Deji, it's always like I always started a job or started a career, and when it doesn't resonate with me, I walk away. I walk away and look for something new. And for me, I guess I was always in search for a career that really resonates with me and gives me inspiration to build, right? So
Yep.
kept going. After I left that job, I thought maybe I need more education, like every other kid, right? So went to a university to study civil engineering. And immediately, 1 year in, and keep in mind, during that time, I became very big in personal development. I started working my body, mind, and spirit. And I would wake up early. I had a routine, and for me, I guess I was deep inside always searching for something more,
Yeah.
something more in the sense of something that's gonna inspire me, and something that's gonna help me, come out of my bubble and
Yeah.
really build something massive. I always thought that I'm here to build something massive. I'm here to make a big movement, right? And so I still remember vividly. One day after my university, I came back and I got a notification on my phone saying that there's a real estate event that's finishing in 10 minutes. I jumped on, I started listening, and I'm like, you know what? I want to learn more. And I signed up for their online coaching. And that's when I started to get the feeling that, you know what, I can't do university. It's not working for me. I'm not happy. And so I put on the whiteboard that if I feel the same way in the next 7 days, no questions asked, I'm going to drop out of university. And
Okay.
so it's absolutely crazy because at that time I was reading a book, Think and Grow Rich, and it just says that if you really want something bad enough, you have to destroy everything behind it and really pursue it full time, right? And
Burn,
really go after it, right?
burn the ships.
Burn the ships. It's a very, very famous quote, right? And so I was like, listen, either I go after doing more research, it was like, okay, I like this. Either I go all in, or either I don't go at all, right? So either go in and die trying, right? And so I jumped in, and so I learned a lot through myself. I went into a lot of different boot camps, spent a lot of money, and I met somebody who said that they can teach me a strategy called wholesaling because, again, I had no money
Yeah.
that time, right? And so the only strategy that I could actually implement is wholesaling, right? And so um, this individual was like, listen, pay me money and I'll teach you. And I was like, okay, you know what? I just said, burn the ships, go all in. Next thing you know, I have $1,000 in my bank account. And so I go out as a young ambition person, take out 5 loans from different credit cards, scrambled and came up with 15 grand to pay this person. That's how
Whoa.
badly I wanted that, G. I wanted it so bad where like I would die trying, right? And so some people will look at that and be like, yo, he's stupid. Like, what's wrong with him? How is he going to take a credit card loan of $15,000, right? Of credit cards and without even having any assurance, right? Rest assured, I always believed in my ability to make things happen. And
Yeah.
so within the first 3 months, I wholesaled my first deal and made 30,000. And that was one of the most happiest days of my life. And
Okay.
so yeah, and so through there, I went through wholesaling real estate, and so yeah, I wholesale real estate. And then I moved into smaller multifamilies, and I started acquiring these deals through investors, right? Because I was finding great opportunities. So I
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
really good at the skill set of finding really, really good opportunities.
Wow. Okay. So that's a lot to unpack. But what I wanted to say is the fact that like I resonate very strongly with you because when I got into wholesaling as well, it almost felt like I needed to do it now and I couldn't wait. And I remember that my first campaign, I actually took out money from my credit card to actually fund the campaign. So it wasn't as like it wasn't $15,000 like you did. It was about 3,500. But I took out money from my credit card to pay for the campaign. So I strongly resonate with that drive to want to do something. And you feel like by waiting, you probably might be losing out on something. Um, with hindsight, when you think through the risk that you took and how you sort of evolved through that journey, do you think if you had to do it again, do you think you would do it the same way? Or do you think maybe you would put some plans in place? Or do you think you would completely burn the ships like you did the last time?
That's a very good question. And this example I would give to a lot of young entrepreneurs, right? So let's look at this skill here, right? So this is the skill. This is the skill where like you are broke, you have no money, right? And this
Yeah.
is a scale where you have so much money and you're living a life of abundance, okay?
Yeah.
Now, in this scale, when you start out, especially as a young entrepreneur, you're so close to the scale here, right? Like this,
Yeah.
right? Like, if this is a scale, you're like right here. You're so close to going all broke. Not even in a bad way, right? And so right now is the time for you to take all risk because you're not far off being fully broke, right? You have nothing to lose. Like, what do you have to lose? Okay, I have to go live back with my parents again, or like I have to go get another job. Since you have nothing to lose, why not just take the risk now? Because if somebody is right here in their journey, for them to take the same risk as somebody here is very different, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so would I do the same thing? Absolutely. Everything happens for a reason, right? If you're truly obsessed with what you want to achieve, you can achieve it. It's only yourself that stops you from achieving it.
Hmm. Okay. Very powerful. And that's a segue to one thing that you mentioned, which is when you feel something, you make a decision and you don't look back. So do you think that's a skill that has sort of helped you through even the selection of your real estate strategies? Because you mentioned that you started off with wholesaling, then you moved into acquisitions, then you moved into multifamily, then land development. Like, how has that, skill set of being able to make a decision quickly and like burn the ships, how has that decision helped as you've been navigating the different real estate strategies?
No, absolutely. So yeah, so like you said, I went from wholesaling to started acquiring smaller multifamilies, then started acquiring larger multifamilies, and then I jumped into the real estate development space, right? Um, yes and no, and I'll tell you why yes and no, right? When you burn the ship, I'm not saying make stupid decisions because if you make any stupid decision on these larger deals, it's the fastest way to leave the business, right? But again, take an approach, because I'm a true believer, is real estate is an external, right? Everything in business starts with you, right? And so if you can build the right habits and the right mindset, the right discipline, these are all external. These are all external of your character, right? And so now going back to multifamily developments, yeah, I am ambitious, but I'm also at the same time I'm very caution, right? I have a lot of caution when I'm doing this due diligence. I have a lot of caution when I'm taking on these development opportunities, and I'm always running these scenarios, right? You cannot be overly ambitious with these because again, one mistake or a couple mistakes can set you back, very back, right? So, you just got to be careful.
Okay. So, in summary, basically, when you are taking risk, be measured in your approach, and not just be um like and not just throw caution to the wind, like be measured in your approach, know exactly what you're doing, but still take massive action.
hmm Exactly, exactly. Yeah, just don't follow the sheeps, right? Do what feels right, and don't try to make the numbers work. The numbers should work by themselves.
I love that. Don't try to make your numbers work. Don't massage it. Okay, so a question that came to mind while we were having this conversation is, do you still wholesale properties? Because as you mentioned, you've transitioned to larger developments, but do you still wholesale properties?
Absolutely not as crazy as I did before. But whatever I wholesale now are typically deals that we pass upon, right?
Okay.
Again, not bad deals, just uh, deals that just don't make sense for our business model. And so again, we have a very vast network with bigger investors, bigger funds that we typically speak with occasionally. And so typically I have a very solid list of buyers and that are high net worth. And so whenever deals that don't make sense for me, I always like to send it over their way and sell it to them.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because they're larger deals. First of all, they're more logical, right?
Hmm.
You're dealing with people that are sophisticated and are gonna look at these assets as a business. There's no emotion; it's just logical,
Hmm.
and the ROI on these deals are also quite high, right? In compared to if you were to wholesale a duplex, because the purchase price of these deals are so high. Your wholesale fee is typically also very very high as well, right? And so to give you perspective, you can expect to make anything from 100K to 5 million. The sky's the limit, right?
Yeah.
But the deals just have to make sense because again, these guys that you go to, they're serious investors, and the last thing you want to do is waste their time.
Yeah. So you actually just hit it on the head. I wanted to understand, like in your world, how do you sort of position like a smaller deal versus a larger deal? So what would be a small deal to you right now versus what would be a large deal to you in terms of the numbers that you were starting to share?
Absolutely. So if we're talking strictly acquisition, smaller deals for me would be anything on the multifamily side would be anything less than 6 units. That's when they go into residential and stuff like that. And so I like to be at least 6 units and up. And then when it comes down to development, 150 units and up, right?
Okay.
Keep in mind, a lot of people make the mistake that in development, you're still paying the same fees for all
Mhm.
your studies, geotechnical. The only fees that are gonna, shadow studies, traffic studies, what have you, right? And so those fees don't change significantly, right? And so, whatever roughly on the study side is gonna cost me to develop a 10 unit is gonna be the same for me to develop a 100 unit, right? And
Oh, I
so
see.
from that perspective, minimum 150 units. And so anything about 150 units, we like to take down ourselves. And then if you were to talk about any larger deals, anything when you go above 500 units, you just have to be very, very careful. It's on the development side because you got to make sure that whatever market you're developing in can consume that much units, right? And so you got to look at, what are the developments that are coming down there, because 500 units is a very, very big number.
Yep.
150 also is, but again, it's still absorbable if you're in the right markets. Multifamily, honestly, I would say, yeah. So 6 to 30 units, I would love to take down all day long. Very, very difficult to come by. Very hard to make the numbers work, especially in the current interest rate space that we're in right now. And
Okay.
anything bigger than that is very hard to find. So,
Okay. So quite interestingly, like I'm looking to understand like the differences even wholesaling these buildings, right? So when you think about a single family, you could just send it out on Facebook or send it out to your buyers list and say, hey guys, this is a building that's ARV 500, maybe buy it for 250. And someone can make a firm offer to you there and then. On the flip side, what's the difference if you had maybe a 50 million building or 50 million
mhm,
apartment building and you had to wholesale that, or like a
mhm.
10 million apartment building? Like, how does the process change? I don't imagine you would have a buyers list on Facebook saying, hey guys, I have this 50 million deal. Like, how does that whole process change, and how have
Mhm.
you had to change, to be able to be that person that's able to do these deals with bigger people?
Absolutely. And so I'll tell you one thing it's not. It's not simple as just sending the deal to your buyers list and hope someone calls you, right? And typically you never want to do that. You never want to market these larger deals because there's a reason why they're not on the market, right?
Yeah.
If you're selling a $15 million building, you don't want the whole public to know, right? Because you have tenants in those prop buildings, right? And you don't want them to now start shaking their hand and the owner is selling the building. They want to keep it very low key, right? And they only
Yeah.
want to talk to people that are serious, right? And so the first difference is whenever I have a deal of that magnitude, um, it's all phone calls, it's all conversations. It's conversation with institutional investors, conversations with various different type of funds, conversations of a middleman who knows larger investors, larger funds, right? And it's a very knit circle, right? But it's not as simple as just sending it out to a mailer list and hopefully something sticks. It's more like having conversations with them, telling them about the deal, already having relationships in place with them, just so whenever you send them a deal, they take it seriously, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. There was someone who mentioned to me that, and this was the person's perception of the industry, but I wanted you to validate it. So, the person sort of pictured how, maybe from 0 units to maybe 4 units, it's like residential, like 4 and above to maybe like 10 or 20, it's like small commercial, where like most retail buyers would buy commercial, would be in that segment. And he mentioned, like, the REITs, like a lot of those guys buy like maybe 100 and above. But he mentioned that there's a sweet spot probably between maybe 40 units and like 100 units where there isn't really competition. So I wanted to get your thoughts. Like, when you look at the different like sizes of assets, is there like a sweet spot where you feel the REITs probably think this is too small for me? The small investors think this is too big for me, and maybe there's not so many people focus on that niche? Like, is there that opportunity that you think there's not so much competition?
If we're talking 5, 10 years ago, yes. Now you will be surprised. Even REITs are buying 40, 30, 40 units. Because you got to keep in mind, in Canada, there isn't a lot of inventory for 100 plus units, right? They have no option but to now, lower their gaze and start buying 30, 40 units. Like there is a lot of REITs, a lot of funds that are buying 30, 40 units. And the competition in that space is I would say very, 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 very high, right?
Mm.
Now your residential competition is always high, right? You're competing with your emotional residential buyers, right?
Yep.
Um, I would say generally multifamily in Ontario, just speaking from experience, is getting very, very difficult. It's very, very
Yeah.
getting very, very difficult to, first of all, to make the numbers work. Second thing is, again, you're always gonna have someone who's gonna just put the offer in and then can hold it for 10 years and then hope to see some profit.
Yep.
For us, we want to buy assets that, again, makes sense and has some sort of upside, right? And so a lot of competition, and especially the tenant laws, they're definitely not helping us at all.
Got it. So, quick question, right? We've spoken a lot about like the differences between like smaller buildings, larger buildings. Now, you mentioned one thing: larger buildings. A lot of these don't go on the market, and that's really the focus of
Yeah.
this podcast. We discuss everything off market. So, when you are looking at large buildings, how do you sort of find motivated or distressed opportunities? Everyone knows how to do that in the residential space. Run social media ads, do bandit signs, door knocking, driving for dollars, sending out direct mail campaigns. But for larger buildings, larger assets, multifamilies, 10, 20, 30 units, how do you sort of find distressed, motivated opportunities where you feel like, wow, I'm getting this at a discounted price?
I got one word for you. And that is relationship. Relationship is everything in that
I was going
space.
to say that. I was going to say relationships.
Deji, it's one of those circles that you have to get inside, and within that circle, everyone's passing each other deals, and they have to take you seriously, right? And so I'll give you an example, right? Again, relationship networking. I'll give you an example, right? I have a couple of guys in different markets are not real estate agents. Neither they're investors. They invest for themselves, but they're not investors, quote unquote investors, right?
Yep.
Or they're also not wholesalers either, right? There's individuals that are connected with the right circle who have access to a lot of these deals, whether that's through them, through family. And what they do is when one of their buddies wants to sell, everybody knows in that group. And if you know one right guy in that group, you also know, right? And so typically how it would typically work is that now that person starts to build network with everybody in a city. And now he knows anyone who's selling the deal, whether he's a real estate agent or not. And you're like, okay, you know what? Why is he doing that? Is he stupid? How are they going to make money? You'd be surprised. A lot of these guys get paid from the owners, right? Because they don't want to use real estate agent, right? They'll be like, hey, listen, hey, Jeff, I'll give you $30,000. I have a $50 million building. You have someone? Yep. Okay, so these guys are just building network, right? And so I have these guys in different areas that call me, okay, I have a deal here. And so like, that's how we start that conversation.
So, that's someone who has graduated from like a bird dog to like an eagle dog. Like it's like a more advanced bird dog, right? Because it seems like the person is just finding deals and bringing it to you.
Exactly. And they're connected because they're just building relationships out there, right? And now I got in that circle as well through that inside person, right? And so now I have access to deals in that network, right? And so you just got to keep building your network in different areas to be able to hear when there's something for sale.
Okay. So a question that I have for you then, and I think I asked it before, but maybe didn't get, like the full response. You mentioned something, they need to take you seriously. And I believe you need to be a certain type of person for people at that level to take it seriously. So how have you had to change, or how have you had to develop yourself, or how have you had to evolve to be able to be in that position where people feel like, if I have a $100 million deal, I can think of Junaid?
I would say, honestly, it just starts with being honest and building a genuine relationship, right? Like, don't try to go in there with big macho that, hey, I have buyers that are ready to buy $50 million deal, because like they'll see right through you, right? Like they come from money, right? And so you try to being bigger macho in there and, playing around with their ego. Just be honest. Just be honest. Be like, listen, this is what I do. If there's any way I can add value to you, please let me know. This is what I've done in the past. And so, again, and don't waste their time. That's very, very important. Don't waste their time. If you haven't done $100 million deal, don't go in there and be like, hey, listen, I have a buyer for $100 million deal. Because if he gives you a chance and you screw it up, you're not getting that call again, right?
That's it.
And so now if I go in there, if I tell him, hey, give me $100 million deal, I would never take a $100 million deal because I'll be honest, I have a vast network, but I don't have that big of a network for me to be confident about selling a $100 million deal. I'm just not there yet.
Yeah. Okay. So don't waste that time. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, right? So when those deals then come to you, how have you found the deal analysis process to be different from what you are used to on the residential side?
It's all numbers based. If we're talking multifamily, it's all number. Again, if we're talking strictly multifamily, it's all like NOI, cap rate, your gross income, your gross expenses or operating expenses, and then the cap rate of the market, and just kind of playing around with the numbers and just arriving at a cap rate which would kind of make sense for you or wouldn't make sense for you. It's strictly numbers based. There's no emotions, right? And typically when you work with these guys as well, for them, it's again, they're looking at it as a business, right? It's not a mom and pop. They're actually serious business. They will run all the numbers and see if it makes sense for them. And they're like, listen, at this price, it would make sense for me because of X, Y, Z. And that's how the conversation typically goes.
Okay. So if you are saying it's all about numbers, like a lot of people are familiar with how the numbers are run for multifamilies, right? It's NOI, cap rate, and whatnot. But now you are also going into the land development space where you have a piece of land. Like, how do you do comparables the same way? Do you value land the same way? Like, how do you assess the potential upside when analyzing like a land development deal? So how do you put land development and multifamily? Like, what's the difference there, and what's the difference in the deal analysis?
Oh boy, man, land is a juggernaut of itself, right? There's a lot that goes into land. Due diligence, again, okay, so I'm gonna break this down into different components. I'll try not to go too deep into it. But again, so if you're looking at agriculture land, which is significantly outside of urban boundary, there's no designation on it. It's just agriculture land, which is, maybe you can develop in 25 years.
So maybe let's start with what's urban boundary, so that people follow through with, okay, this is what the urban boundary is. If something is inside the urban boundary or outside the urban boundary, what does that mean?
Right. So you explained to me, because what I was going to do, I was going to go outside and work my way back inside. Or do you want to start with inside and work my way back outside? You let me know.
So I think like the end-to-end process, so that everyone can sort of follow through with the steps. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll start from inside. Okay. So a little background. So the way developments typically work on the land side of things is you can only develop and get zoning inside of an urban boundary. Urban boundary is a boundary around each city, which gives you the right to get zoning. And typically city have plans of like commercial here, residential here, industrial here. They're different areas, and zoning is like what's allowed on that land, right? And so typically you would imagine typically land inside the urban boundaries is quite expensive because it already has zoning, right? It's you can go immediately and start developing it, and you'll know what you can do on it, right? If you want to just use the existing zoning, right? Okay. Now you start looking at land that's currently outside of the urban boundary, right? That's sitting beside the urban boundary. Now keep in mind that land is not going to be as expensive as the land that's inside the urban boundary, but again, it's not going to be that cheap either, right? Because even though it's agriculture, these lands, let's suppose they have what's called a designation, right? So what city typically does is every I would say every year, I would say like in time, they expand the urban boundary, okay? And as they expand the urban boundary, the land that's sitting outside the urban boundary, and when it gets inside the urban boundary, now you can get zoning on it, right? But before they expand it, they like to designate each area that's sitting outside, right? They say, oh, this land outside the urban boundary, currently agriculture, our designation on this is commercial. So when they do expand it, this is going to be commercial. Or no, this is going to be residential. Or no, this is going to be industrial, right? So based on that, when they look at the official plans, they can know, okay, this land, if I buy here, and if the expansion is maybe like in 5 or 10 years, my land value if I buy at right now, because if they're selling agricultural land, if I buy at $40,000 an acre and it goes inside the urban boundary, maybe my land is going to be worth about $400,000 an acre, right? Just plain example of numbers, right? But the lifts are quite significant. You'll be surprised.
Okay. So a quick question that I have. So it looks like there's different stages. So there's land outside the urban boundary, then there's a lift when it becomes inside the urban boundary, and there's a lift when maybe it gets site plan approval, and there's a
Yep.
lift when it gets, so like those different stages, where do you think the biggest lift comes? Is it from outside urban boundary to inside urban boundary, or inside urban boundary to zoning, or zoning to SPA?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where do you think the biggest lift comes? Where you are focusing on, and where investors should be focusing on?
Right. Okay. So I'll go one layer deeper. Okay. So typically, any land, whenever you take the land through different stages, like you have land, raw land. Now, once you get zoning, it value increases now because it has an actual zoning in place, right? And then when you take from zoning to let's say draft land, the value significantly goes up, right? And I'm gonna answer your question as well. Significantly goes up because now the land has a purpose, right? It has a purpose for commercial, residential, industrial, whatever it is, right? And then when you reach a site plan, has the most value because now a builder can immediately buy it and start construction on it, right?
Okay.
So now your question is, which lift is the biggest lift for land for it for investors to make the most money? And I'll tell you this answer. It actually happens when you start to buy land that's outside the urban boundary, and that's called land banking, right? Because if you're buying, let's say $40,000 an acre, $30,000 an acre, now when it goes into the urban boundary, you get zoning. That land is $400K an acre. Look at the multiplier factor.
Whoa.
Look at the multiplier factor. So 40,000 an acre roughly goes to 400,000 an acre, right? And if I'm talking Mississauga, guys that bought land in Mississauga for, let's say 50,000 an acre, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, man, they're selling their land $500,000 or no, not sorry, not $500,000, $1 million an acre, depending on the parcel of land.
So I guess the question would be with land banking, so when you're analyzing deals, it's like I'm analyzing the ARV of this property because in 3 months I know that it's going to be this price when I first did a acquisition. But with land banking, aren't there things that are not within your control? Like, for example,
Absolutely.
do you know when the urban boundary would then be expanded to include your property? How long would you need to wait for that to happen? And then when you buy land, is there a way to monetize that asset so that land cash flows? With buildings, you could put a tenant there and the building cash flows. But when you buy land, are there ways you can monetize the land to allow the land cash flow, or you are basically holding it for like 10 years?
Okay. Yeah. There's few ways. If typically this land is agriculture, right? So the only thing you can do is farm it, right? But typically a few parcel of land that I've personally seen have what's called a grandfather zoning. Maybe as a grandfather industrial zoning where there's a warehouse and people are running it because it's grandfathered in, right?
Okay.
And so you can still make income, but it's not significant enough. And to answer your other question, keep in mind, it is an educational speculation. You know how we use the word speculation? Because you don't know when the urban boundary is going to expand. It can be 4 years or it can be 10, 15 years, right? You don't know. And again, Deji, with every investment, it's risk to reward.
Yeah.
Right? And that's why you're paying $500,000 for land inside the urban boundary, and you're paying $40,000 rent that's sitting outside and does have designation.
So I'm not sure if I should be saying this, but when you said no one knows when the urban boundary would be changed, it seems like a few months ago, a few people knew when the urban boundary was going to change.
Yep.
Is there anything about
Okay, I'll say something, and I'll say something, and okay.
So
I know exactly what you're talking about, by the way.
So I was going to say, is there anything publicly available that you can speak about that doesn't put you in an interesting position?
Yeah. Okay. So first things first, you gotta look at the city official plans. And then see what their plan is, right? Because whenever they designate land, whenever any land that has designation, typically means that that's the next expansion, right? It can be 5 to 10 years, in worst case, maybe 15 years. Now these strategies that you're talking about is these big players have big parcel of land and has the money to take care of a couple people's pocket to get the expansion so their land gets included in, right? I know both sides of the stories. I know the company and I know the whole situation that happened, and it's I got no comments, man. I mean, it's a dirty game. It's a dirty game. I'll be honest, it's a dirty game. And it's just unfortunate, right? I mean, right now, even competing with sharks, because right now the way I would look at myself is I'm a small fish in a fish tank of sharks, right? And that's always the position you always want to be in,
Yeah.
because then you have the opportunity to grow and become a shark.
Yeah. Okay, so like I know that recently, you bought a 44 unit building. So maybe let's start off with identifying, like, with the stages that you took us through, at what stage is that 44 unit building, and what's like the next step, like what's going to be your lift? Did you buy the 44 unit building at the, like, outside the urban boundary stage, or did you buy it at inside the urban boundary stage? Like, just give us an overview of what the deal looks like.
Okay, amazing. So yeah, we bought this recently, and so again, this parcel was an infill development, meaning that what infill means is it has structures in place. So you're redeveloping existing structure into the highest and best use, right? And
Okay.
this was within urban boundary and already at zoning, right?
Okay.
And so if I were to give you describe you a layout of that whole area, is like building here, building here, building here, building behind it, and in between there's two properties side by side. Okay. One of them was on market, listed for crazy amount of money. I don't know how and it was in the market, right? No one was buying it, right? So when I saw them, like, it has a zoning. So what the zoning allowed us, it was one of the highest density zoning that you can get in Waterloo. That's where the properties were. Okay. It allowed you a maximum height of 81 meters, which is about 25 stories, as per right zoning. Right, as per the right zoning, without doing anything, right? And so we're like, interesting. These are two last parcels here.
So just to add, so I just want to make sure that everyone understood that. So as of right means you don't need to do a zoning application. The zoning already allows and permits you to be able to go 25 stories up. Okay. Yeah.
You got it. Yeah, the zoning allowed us to go 25 stories up. Yeah. Okay. And so, one was on the market. We're like, you know what? We may have something here. We already have the zoning, least amount of resistance. And so we locked the property up that was on the market. I'm not going to go into the shithole. It was a lot of work, a lot of back and forth. We had to door knock the property next door, convince the guy to sell. The guy's mother passed away, so the sister had the right to sell the property. It took us a whole year, but we got it.
A whole year? Okay.
A whole year.
So this is the reason why we are having this conversation today, because again, we discussed everything about off market. So you got the first property on the market, you got the second property off market. Given that it took a year to actually close both deals, like, how did you keep the first property under contract for that long for you to get the second one off market?
Right. Okay. So again, this was at the peak of the market where nobody was buying. Everybody was just scared. So what we did was, so this was our strategy, right? So what we did was, when we bought the property that was in the market, we pushed the closing out far out, and then we had our conditional for 6-7 months, right? And we also negotiated a 22 room vacancy, 22 unit vacancy, right? And so, as we are currently in the due diligence, I had my team there that was turning over the units, right? So it was about a 4.5 cap that we bought that building at. Okay. But after we did the turnover before closing, we had 22 new leases. And at that point, the cap rate jumped to 5.5 or 6%, right?
Okay, so so just so that everyone is following, what you're saying is, before you closed the building, you had an agreement with the seller to take operational control of the building, and you started turning over units and turning over tenants during your conditional period.
Exactly. Yeah. So we negotiated a 22 room vacancy, and then we started doing the turnover before closing. And as we're doing that, we were negotiating with the property next door.
Got it.
And and that took the longest time because there was a lot of back and forth.
Okay. So the thinking was that even if the second property didn't sell to you, you were essentially still buying a multifamily building that in and of itself should still be a viable deal without the off-market one.
Absolutely. It was still a viable deal, but our strategy was different. But again, we didn't go firm on this until we were very confident and secure that we have the other one locked up and we can make a move and take them both down, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so for your listeners, once we close on the property, so our plan with this again, we're redeveloping both of them into a high-rise condominium. We went in with very ambitious plans to potentially create a landmark in the city of Waterloo, because these are the last two parcel in that neighborhood,
Mm.
right?
Okay. So all the other buildings are already high-rise condominiums.
Correct,
Okay.
right? And so that's why we're being very ambitious with these plans. And so right now, and then when we bought it, I had my team turn over actually a lot of the units in there, and we're actually cash flowing positive
On a
as we're
multifamily.
developing it. Yeah.
Okay. So how did you get to that point where you bought a multifamily building in Waterloo and you're cash flow positive?
Turnovers, right? Turnovers. Keep in mind, our biggest demographics in that area is students, because
Mm-hmm.
it's saturated and located walking distance to University of Waterloo,
Mm-hmm.
University of Laurier, and also Contega College, right? So our demographic were students, and the
Okay.
students, they're only there for maybe 1 semester, 2 semesters. So our turnovers were very quick, and it
Got it.
got to a point where we got a lot of these turnovers early on. And so keep in mind, when we bought this, we were getting about 575 per room. And after we bought this, we after the turnover happened, we re-rented these rooms out for 950 per bedroom.
Ooh. Whoa. 44 units. Wow. That's sick.
Yeah. So you can do the math, right? And so after that, we were cash flowing positive, and it's very difficult because with developments, you don't cash flow. It's still like your biggest cost in development is because holding the land, because you cannot generate any revenue on it. The reason why this was a phenomenal project is because we have a cash flowing asset that's going up in value. Keep in mind, because we did the full turnover and now we're cash flowing, the NOI is a lot higher,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
meaning that the property value jumped up in value significantly as well,
Yeah.
with just a natural turnover.
Okay. So a question that I have, and this almost sounds like the agreement for sales strategy, right? A quick question. You were turning over tenants, spending your time, spending your resources, spending your money, but you were not firm. So, if, for example, the second deal didn't pan out, is there a world where you guys would have not continued with the Waterloo project? Like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll tell you one thing, when you get into larger deals, you have to spend some money. There are deals where we've spent a lot of money and we have to walk away, right? And
hmm,
and that's just the name of the game, right? The last thing I want to do is take on a risky project, right? Or lose 10, 20 grand. It's just it's an opportunity cost, what I
yeah,
like to call it.
okay. So the cost of being able to enjoy the upside of a 44 unit development is obviously having to, spend a few bucks in doing like renovations, and turning over
Oh,
tenants and
we
all
didn't do
those.
any renovations, by the way. We did bare minimum. Maybe clean the property, maybe just little paint. Because we're redeveloping, right? There's no point of us putting more money in the buildings if one
Okay.
day this is gonna be a condominium, right?
Okay. So so you found the first property on the MLS. Was that what opened you up to the opportunity, or were you looking for those types of deals? And how do you sort of spot? Because I imagine that it's been on the MLS, right? So it was on the MLS. You probably aren't the only one who is looking at the MLS. Everyone has access to the MLS. So, how is it that you found that opportunity? You were able to discern what opportunity you had in your front, or maybe other people were not able to do so.
That's a very, very good question, and we were absolutely looking for our development deal, right? So off market, on market, and I guess I don't know. It's very weird, and because you got to keep in mind, a lot of these larger developers, they don't have time to door knock. They don't have time to try to assemble parcels to make a deal work, right? They have enough. They have enough meat on their plate already, right? And so, like deals like that, the reasons why it's very difficult for people to buy it, because there's a lot of work behind it, right? You got to door now, you got to make sure both parties are still willing to sell at the same time.
Yeah.
And so, we were just at the right place at the right time. And when we saw that, we're like, you know what, I think we have to move forward. And so we did.
Perfect. And you are right. Like a lot of people might get stuck on the fact that, oh, it's a 44 unit development. It goes to 25 stories. But a lot of them probably didn't catch the fact that you guys worked on this for a year to get that deal under contract. And not so many people would consistently follow through with a project for a year just to see it come to fruition. So just wanted to call that out so that if anyone was just hinged on the success and not necessarily looking at the habits that led to that success, I just mentioned that so that they understand that you guys are actually putting the work for close to a year or even over a year
It's
just to
a
get.
lot of work. Like if you think this is easy, you walk in and you find a deal and it's just sitting there on the table for you to come pick up. Like that's not how it works. There's a lot of hard work to find these opportunities. Because like I told you, you are competing with sharks
Yeah.
that have resources, that have a lot more capital than you, and so you have to be unique and different.
Yeah. Okay. So, you have this Waterloo project, like going forward, like what's your focus in the land development space, in the multifamily space, even in the land banking space, because for people that want to get into this space, how can they help you? How can they add value to you? What are you focused on, that someone can help you achieve?
No, absolutely, right? So again, our biggest bottleneck right now is finding the right opportunity, right? We're very, very conservative with our strategy and our numbers, and we just like to really take down secured and home run deals that are, in the worst case scenario, still very, very profitable. And that my analogy always was like, you make your money on the buy.
Yeah.
Development is bonus. You make your money on the buy. As long as you can buy right, you will not lose unless you do something stupid. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and so right now, again, we built a platform, an education platform for a lot of, because what I've noticed as well is people that are in the development space, they like to keep it hush hush. They don't want to share a lot of things with people, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a very hard market to enter into. They have knowledge that they don't want to share. It's being passed down through generations. And so we ended up creating a platform, Real Vesting, on Instagram, where now we're kind of teaching more about developments, teaching more about how we do development, what are different ways of developments, what have you. And so we're trying to build an education platform. And again, our goal is to get more people involved in the development space, because in Canada, we really, really need it, right? There is a massive shortage. People are leaving the country. There's a shit ton of bureaucracy in our country. And so we need more developers, more ambitious, to really change the course of our country, because the way it's going right now, it's going downhill, in my opinion.
Okay. So, and you're spot on, right? Because there's a lot of immigration. I usually reference like a chart that I saw, which is like, I think 90% of the population in Canada, you know, is like, it sits in the southwestern GTA, like
Yep.
Canada has a huge
Yeah.
land mass, but everyone is just concentrated in like the lower part of the country. Do you see developments happening in like the northern parts of Ontario, for example, the northern like territories, or are you guys just focused on developments in like GTA?
We're definitely looking elsewhere as well. To be honest, it's getting very difficult to develop here. And I'll just, like, again, if I go on a rant, just feel free to stop me. But like, what really boggles my mind is Canada is the second largest country in the world, and we're having a housing issue. Like how does that make sense, right? You have such a large landmass, and yet you have issues. And keep in mind, the population of Canada is the same as population of Texas, one state in America. And now
Yeah,
you're like, why is there so much issue? Why cannot we build more houses? It's too
yeah,
much bureaucracy, too much
yeah,
too much control, over developers. If I were to tell everyone here, right, the condos or new development or new houses that you guys are buying, 1/3 of that is just taxes to the government. So if they lower those taxes, you will get your houses for much cheaper. aside from that, we're in a crisis, a labor crisis in Canada, right? It's again, what type of immigrations that we're calling into Canada? We should be calling in more labor workers to fasten the process of housing, right? There's just too much control. And honestly, it's just, as developers, it makes you really sad and really makes you wonder, because last year, 500,000 people left Canada because affordability is really bad here. People can't afford the basic needs of living.
So it's tough. Like I don't know what to say. Like, I came into the country about 4 years ago. So a lot of these things might not necessarily be like, they might not necessarily resonate with me right now. But I've started to see the stats of people living in Canada, and I can imagine with more people coming, if we don't solve the housing crisis, it's just going to be worse.
Yeah, I definitely see that. And yeah, honestly, I feel really bad for people that have immigrated here to and really have in their mind that they got into a country and they're gonna live a positive, such a beautiful life, because Canada is one of the best countries to live in, until they get here and know that this is a shit show. Like, a one bedroom will cost you $1,500, right? Your basic needs of living is like if you're not making 5,000 to 10,000 a month, or even less than 10,000 a month, how are you surviving, right? Especially in the GTA.
Yeah, it's tough, man. Okay, definitely giving people a lot to think about. That's why everyone should be thinking about development. So again, I just want to say like a huge thank you, man, because the development space, it almost feels like a black box. Like before you like started mentioning development, like I knew nothing about development. So it's been very refreshing to even learn a lot about how the space works. And yeah, just want to say thank you for for coming on the episode. Before we let you go, there's usually a question that we ask, which is, all through your journey, can you tell us if you've had any L? And by L, we mean learning, or we mean like a loss in real estate that made you like think and just learn from. That you can share with the audience.
Absolutely. And again, so that analogy I gave you guys. Actually, no, I'm gonna get back to the analogy after I tell you my story. Okay. So we bought a building for a beautiful price, very very cheap. On market, I took it down. 18-unit building, very very cheap. We did the full renovation. Everything was good. The property valuation was good, and then the market started to take turn, right?
Mhm.
And so our biggest mistake is picking partners who don't align with you, especially capital
Mm.
partner who don't have the same mindset and have the same alignment as you, right? And so out of that, the relationship became sour because that partner wanted to exit, and we want to stay on because I know it's just a market cycle, it's a hiccup, and we can still be very profitable in this venture.
Yeah.
And so, every partner got a sour taste in their mouth, and they're like, you know what, honestly, like if we're having an argument like this, let's exit, and honestly, like, let's walk away, right? Now, me that bought the building for such a good price, me that did all the renovations in the property. Keep in mind, we had three partners, and the last partner had another role. And after the renovation, they're like, okay, now we have to sell. I'm like, listen, like, I did all this work. Now you just want to sell the asset. And I'm like, I thought this was a long-term asset, right? And so a lot of back and forth. We ended up selling it, and it was me that found a buyer for it as well, right? I charged $0, right? Put a lot of time, energy into it, and again, ended up selling the asset, and we still made profit. Um, but the biggest thing was, again, with the same analogy that I put on everything. You gotta buy your asset at the right price, because you make your money not in the renovations or all that other fancy stuff that everyone likes to do with their burn and flips. It's the cost that you buy it at, because you will make your money on the buy. Even if
Yeah.
shit hits the fan, you will still come out positive. Maybe not as positive as you would have, but still positive. So
Yeah.
this is what I would leave everyone with.
Boom, mic drop, mic drop, mic drop. Just want to say a big thank you once again. Like, this has been a fire episode. For anyone who wants to connect with you, man, like, how do you do that?
Absolutely. Honestly, simple as just come on Instagram. My Instagram is invest with JJ. And yeah, I record my journey. We're heavily going on the social media this year, and as you know, He's a content creator like myself, so he understands all the struggles of a content creator.
Struggles. Full-time job, that's what it is.
Full-time job. Yeah. So Invest with JJ is my Instagram, and then our coaching. I wouldn't say really coaching because we're not charging anything for giving information. You can check us out at Real Vestin, and you can find that link as well on my Invest with JJ page, and you can get free education about developments.
Okay, perfect. And that's it, folks. Thank you very, very much for listening to the Deals Estate Wholesaling podcast. Thank you, JJ, for coming on. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on Apple, Google, and Spotify. And be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you know when JJ's episode drops and you know when our next one drops. So until then, remember, a deal a day keeps scarcity at bay.